Assalamualaikum and good day everyone. My name is Nora Swaliza Abdullah from Faculty of Information and Communication Technology U10. In this lecture, we will discuss about one operation of the data manipulation language, which is aggregation. First, let's look at the lesson outcomes of this topic. At the end of this lesson, we should be able first to understand different aggregation operations, and second, to know how to form queries using aggregation operation in SQL statement. Let's start our lesson. What are aggregate operations? Aggregate operations are used to perform summation of data. For example, as in our library management system case study, we would like to know the number of book titles available in the library. SQL can perform various mathematical summaries on a relational table, such as counting the number of rows for a specified column, summing the values in a specified column, finding the minimum or maximum value for a specified column, and finally, averaging the values in a specified column. The aggregate functions such as count, sum, mean, max and average are available to be used within the select statement in order to perform these mathematical summaries. Therefore, aggregate operations can be defined as functions that perform a calculation on a set of values and return a single value. These operations accumulate information from multiple tuples or rows, thus forming a single tuple summary or an aggregated view of the subject of concern. For example, from the expense report for ABC company, as shown in the slide, we can get the total expense from the total expense column values using aggregate function sum. There are 5 main aggregate functions which are count, sum, average, mean, and max. These functions operate on a single column of a table and returns a single value. For example, from the expense report for ABC company, as shown in the previous slide, the sum function can be applied on the total expense column to return the total of all the expenses. Count, mean, and max functions can be applied to numeric and non-numeric fields, but sum and average may be used on numeric fields only. For example, count, mean, and max functions can be applied to attributes with date data type, but sum and average cannot be applied to attributes with date data type. Now let's look at all aggregate functions in more details. The ISO standard defines 5 aggregate functions as shown in the table. The count function returns the number of rows of a given column. The sum function returns the total of the numeric values in a given column. The average function returns the average value of a given column. The mean function returns the lowest value in a given column, and the max function returns the highest value in a given column. Now, by using the book table from the library management system case study, we will look at some SQL statements to perform each of the aggregate operations. The book table contains records of the books that are available in the library. Each book record contains 7 attributes, which are ISBN, book title, edition, year published, quantity of book copies, book category ID, and publisher ID. Let's look at the first example, which is the count aggregate function. Suppose we want to get the number of book titles which are available in the library. Each row in the book table contains the information of each book title. Thus, the count function is used to count the number of book titles in the book table. The SQL statement in the slide shows how we use the count function on the book title column to get the number of book titles. The results of this statement is 8, which means there are 8 book titles available in the book table. Now, let's look at how the count function works. The count function counts the number of rows of the book title column and returns the number of rows, which is 8. For the second example, we will look at the sum aggregate function. Suppose we want to get the number of book copies available in the library. In the book table, for each row, book quantity attribute contains the number of book copies available for each book title. To get the number of book copies available for all the book titles, we have to summing up all the values of the book quantity column. The SQL statement in the slide shows how we use the sum function on the book quantity column to get the number of book copies. The results of the SQL statement shows there are 54 copies of books available in the library. Now, let's look at how the sum function works. The sum function calculates the sum of all values in the book quantity column and returns 54 as the number of book copies for all the book titles. For the third example, we will look at the average aggregate function. Suppose we want to get the average number of copies of a book title available in the library. The SQL statement in the slide shows how we use the average function on the book quantity column to get the average number of book copies. The results of this SQL statement is the average number of copies of a book title, which is 6.75. The slide shows how the average function works to get the average number of copies of a book title. The average value is calculated by dividing the sum of book quantity values, which is 54, with the number of book titles, which is 8. Therefore, we get the average number of copies of a book title, which is 6.75. From the previous slide, the average function returns the average number of copies of a book title as a decimal value, which is 6.75. We may want to get the integer value for the average number of book copies. We can use the round function as shown in the slide to get the rounded average value, which is 7. For the fourth example, we will look at the max aggregate function. Suppose we want to get the maximum number of copies of a book title which are available in the library. The SQL statement in the slide shows how the max function is used on the book quantity column to get the maximum number of book copies. The results of this SQL statement is the maximum number of copies of a book title, which is 10. The slide shows how the max function works to get the maximum number of copies of a book title. The max function is applied to the book quantity column. This function will select the highest value among all the book quantity values, which is 10. There are 4 book records with the highest book quantity value. However, only one value is returned by the max function. For the last example, we will look at the min aggregate function. Suppose we want to get the minimum copies of a book title which are available in the library. The SQL statement in the slide shows how the min function is used on the book quantity column to get the minimum number of book copies. This statement returns the minimum number of copies of a book title, which is 2. The slide shows how the min function works to get the minimum number of copies of a book title. The min function is applied on the book quantity column. Thus, the function will select the lowest value among all the book quantity values, which is 2. Hopefully, we already understand about aggregate functions and know how to write SQL statements to get summary of our data. You may refer to the listed references used for this lesson or any database books to get further information about this topic. In the next lesson, we will see how aggregate functions will be implemented if there are conditions in our query. We will also discuss the difference between count all and other aggregate functions and the implementation of aggregate functions used in conjunction with distinct keywords. Until then, thank you for watching and Assalamualaikum.